The XC90 is a car that represents major leaps forward for Volvo as a brand. When the first generation was launched, it represented a step into a market that Volvo hadn't previously occupied, that of the on-road focused SUV. And it was a step made in typical Volvo fashion. Unlike the BMW X5, for example, which focused on driving dynamics, the Volvo very much stuck to what Volvo knew, which was practicality. It had 7 seats and bags of safety equipment. With the second gen XC90, Volvo stuck to the core principles. This is still a practical car, it has 7 seats, it's still a very, very safe car too. But what it does is have raised levels of interior quality. It's also got improved styling and the latest tech. You can get this car with a plug-in hybrid engine, for example. Is this a package that can still keep up with rivals? Well, let's find out in our Need to Know video on the used Volvo XC90.
Launched in 2014, the second generation XC90 was a long time coming, and it's safe to say it was worth the wait. While the Mark I model, which began production in 2002, had begun to feel outdated, the new Mark II XC90 was groundbreaking in almost every way. Built on a new platform, it didn't just set new standards for Volvo, it did so for the whole luxury SUV segment. In terms of technology, efficiency, style and safety, it was a giant leap forward. It was also the car that set the tone for a new design language that is now echoed across all modern Volvos. With its trademark Thor's hammer headlights, portrait infotainment system and a minimalist but high quality Swedish interior, the XC90 offered a genuine alternative to its German rivals.
When you're behind the wheel of the XC90, it's very apparent that this is a premium SUV. Everything about it feels nicely put together. There's lots of nice materials dotted around the cabin. You've got Bowers & Wilkins stereo, for example, and also this portrait screen. Now, this portrait screen was quite cutting edge when it was introduced back in 2015, but it is starting to look a little dated compared to some rivals now. What I will say is that the functionality of it is very usable. You do have your climate controls and your heated steering wheel and your heated seats, for example, are all within the infotainment system, which can make it a little bit tricky to use on the go. But on the whole, I think it's quite an intuitive system. As for the rest of the car, entry spec is momentum, but it's far from entry spec. You've got absolutely everything you would need. So there's alloy wheels, dual zone climate control, you've got adaptive cruise, you've got a digital display, for example, you've got heated seats that I mentioned before, and just everything you would expect on a car of this level. If you was to look at our design, which is the spec that we've got today, those changes are cosmetic really. You get some slightly larger and different alloy wheels. You also get our design seats and slightly different body styling. Top spec inscription just take things to another level altogether with bigger alloys and a bigger digital dash, for example. From a practicality perspective in the XC90, there are some nice big door bins where you can store some large bottles of water, for example. You've got a couple of cup holders underneath here, 12-volt socket as well, and underneath the armrest you've got a couple of USB ports as well as some storage space. One of the best things about this middle row in the XC90 is the amount of space. It's one of the few cars where I can sit behind my own seating position. So I'm just over 6'1". I have the seat pretty much as far back as it goes, and even in that position I'm still able to get relatively comfortable here. My shins are touching the back of the seat a little bit, but generally speaking it's impossible for me to get in behind my own seat. So if this was in the position of someone who was a bit more of an average height, I would have plenty of space for my knees. There's also decent headroom as well, so even with the panoramic roof, which can sometimes eat into headspace, I can still sit fairly upright. The one thing I will say is that the seat is a little bit narrow. That is, I guess, the cost of having 3 kind of proper seats in the back there. So my shoulders are a bit pinched. There isn't much of a transmission tunnel down here though, so if somebody was to squeeze into that middle seat, I think they'd be quite comfortable compared to how they'd be in other SUVs. In terms of practicality and creature comforts in the back of the XC90, you've got climate controls here so you can adjust them yourself. You've got a 12-volt socket to charge devices. You've also got some air vents to the sides. to keep you cool when the AC is on, and some of those Bowers and Wilkins speakers here as well, so you don't miss out on that great sound system. The overall feel back here is one of quality. The seats are very nice soft leather, and everything feels very well put together. We've also got some handy sun blinds here in the back for keeping your rear occupants shaded. One thing of note about the XC90 is that there are only 2 ISOFIX points in the back of the car. On something like an Audi Q7, you'd actually get 3 ISOFIX points across this middle row. So if that's important to you, it's probably worth considering that car instead. With the rear 2 seats in the XC90, I will say they're actually surprisingly comfortable. They feel like proper seats, not just a couple of kids' seats that have been chucked in the back. So when I'm sitting, I'm relatively comfortable. The obvious problem is the lack of space. So for myself, there's no headroom. I'm having to slouch. The seats in front can be moved backwards and forwards, so we've pushed them forwards, and actually I have got space for my knees, and I think with a average sized driver at the front and these seats pushed forwards, everybody would have a decent amount of space actually. I couldn't sit in this position for a long period of time though, because of the height of the floor. Essentially my knees are too high up, and that is what is proving to be uncomfortable. But were it not for that, it wouldn't be too bad. I would suggest that these seats are very much for teenagers and kids if you want to do any kind of considerable time, but most adults could probably manage a short journey in the back here. In terms of boot space, well, the XC90 is not lacking. Firstly, all models come with an electronic tailgate, which is always useful, and even with the 2 rear seats up, you're getting 350 litres of space here, which is nigh on the same amount of space you'll get in a VW Golf. If you want to lower the seats, well, that's relatively easy. Just press a button and they fold straight down, and you've now got an absolutely vast space. This is basically 1,000 litres worth of space. It's absolutely huge, and as big as you're ever going to need. Now, there is no hiding that the XC90 is a big car. It is a big old beast to be driving around in. But what that means, as you would expect, is that it's very, very comfortable. It's very quiet inside. It's very refined. It is a great place to do big miles. I can tell you that. You can eat up pretty big journeys in this car. And that's because of a number of things. Firstly, the seats. The seats are the best in the business, in my personal opinion. I think that Volvo makes the most comfortable seats, and therefore the seats in the XC90 are no different. They're a very, very comfortable place to perch yourself for several hours in the saddle. There's also all of the kind of autonomous driving kit that comes with the car as well. Really helps for those long journeys. So the adaptive cruise control, the lane keep, in particular in Volvos, the system's just really, really good. It just works really well, and the car basically drives itself. And I personally find that for really long journeys, it just takes a lot of the stress out for you. Just look, you're not going to leave the car to just drive itself, but the car really helps you, if that makes sense. It's just a little nudge here and there to keep you in lane. You put the adaptive cruise control on. You know, you just got to sit there and watch what's going on, and the car will monitor the distance for you. That's really handy in traffic on motorways, for example, or in roadworks, if you're in an average speed camera zone. It's just all things like that that add up to make the car just really good for long journeys. And that's not to say that it's bad around town. The steering's very light, almost too light at times. This car is not one that's made to be, you know, it's not a performance model. It's not made for throwing around country lanes. It's a big, comfy cruiser, so the steering is light just to make it more manoeuvrable around town and at slow speeds. It does feel a little bit disconnected, but like I say, that's just to make it easier to drive. And whilst it's a big car, it never feels particularly unwieldy, and it's actually not too difficult to navigate into and out of parking spaces, for example, because there's 360-degree cameras in this particular model. So you've got a camera for every angle, and you can see what you're doing when you're parking, when you're pulling into a bay. So it just really helps given the size of the car. You do feel quite sat forwards in this car compared to some other competitors, and you feel like there's a vast expanse of car behind you because of the 7 seats. So you've got those 2 rear seats, and it's just a long vehicle. So that might take some getting used to for some people, but once you get used to it, it's very easy to deal with. So when this Mk2 XC90 was launched, Volvo took the decision to basically only offer 2-litre 4-cylinder engines, which is quite unusual in this space. When you think of rivals such as the Audi Q7, even the VW Touareg, they offer 3-litre V6 engines, and that's not something that Volvo wanted to do. So it's a 2-litre engine only, no matter whether you're going for petrol or diesel, you're only going to get 2-litre 4 cylinders. And that's not to say that it makes the XC90 feel underpowered, because it doesn't. The car's not underpowered at all. Whichever version you go for, you get a good blend of performance. Sure, economy, no matter which version you choose, it's not going to be the greatest. This is a big, heavy SUV. If you're averaging around 30 mpg, you're doing quite well. It's just unavoidable. If you want a car of this type, it's just something you're going to have to accept. So on launch, there were the 2 petrols, one of which was just a pure petrol, one was a plug-in hybrid, and there was also a diesel version badged D5. That was later upgraded, you could say. They also offered a Power Pulse version, which had slightly more horsepower. In 2019, the XC90 was facelifted and the engines changed slightly. So you'll see things like B5, and a B5 is a hybrid, but that could be a hybrid petrol or diesel, so it can be a little bit confusing. The normal diesel was rebadged B5 from D5 as well, but you do still have this car, which we've got today, which is the T8 plug-in hybrid. If you want the ultimate in performance, shall we say, for an XC90, although that's stretching the word, it's this car. It's the T8. It's the quickest from 0 to 60. It will do it in 5.8 seconds, which is very sprightly for a car of this size, and it also has very good range, to be honest with you. If you want to drive on battery power only, the range is pretty impressive for a car of this size, and better than pretty much all of its competitors. So this is a Volvo. It's no surprise that it's a very, very safe car. It's got a 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating. There's all the airbags you could wish for, and a host of driver aids that just help to make this car incredibly safe. There's lane keep, there's autonomous emergency braking, you've got cross traffic alert, so when you're reversing out of a junction, you've got blind spot monitoring, you've got the runoff system, where if the car thinks you're running off the road, it will tighten the seat belts and raise the windows, preempting a collision. There's just, everything you could ask for in terms of safety this car has got, and it comes with arguably the best suite of standard safety features of any car. It really does. Volvos are famous for their safety, and this car is no different. It really has everything you could ask for in terms of a safe place to have your family and go on kind of long journeys, holidays, trips, that kind of thing. The Volvo XC90 is still one of the very best premium SUVs on the market. It offers a great blend of practicality, luxury and safety that is pretty much unrivaled. If you want a 7-seat SUV that offers more engine choices and a bit more power, then I'd suggest looking at something like the Audi Q7, where there are options like the SQ7, which is a real performance-oriented SUV. If you want a 7-seat SUV that's a bit more focused on ability to go off-road and towing, then maybe you'd be better off looking at something like a Land Rover Discovery. Whatever you're looking for, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more need-to-know videos such as this.